Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
Hi and welcome to another truly inspiring episode. Today we have with us the owner and director of AdventureWorks. AdventureWorks is an outdoor education company working primarily with secondary schools, specialising in delivering high quality and valuable experiential and adventure education programmes to engage, inspire and explore success. As always though, our guest has a much bigger story. In 2015, he received a spinal cord injury and had to learn how to live life in a wheelchair. Although learning to navigate a new body was at times challenging, it is the more profound and confronting journey of finding love and acceptance for himself that has been the most prominent and soulful part of his transformation. On this episode, we investigate surrendering to the situation rather than fighting against it, and what it really takes to look within rather than rush to blame or anger. We are so pleased to welcome Mark Mandeno.
Mark, welcome on board.
Yeah, kia ora.
Lovely to have you with us. We have chatted so many times, and I know that over the past 8 years, you have seen 4 of my children through the Duke of Edinburgh Award programme, which is part of AdventureWorks. Can you tell us what your business does and who it caters for?
Yeah, so we're an outdoor education business primarily. So we're servicing our biggest client group is secondary schools, and we're doing our best to provide experiences and experiential learning opportunities that schools struggle within their own resourcing to do a lot of or to do well. So you know, we're in an adventure business. There's all sorts of regulations and limitations that schools face. So we're just trying to provide resources, services, qualified instructors, experienced facilitators to provide really valuable experiences for these young people. Yeah, it's born out of a personal passion. I've had a life of adventure myself and just grown my own passion. Firstly, from being in the outdoors and having quite deeply special moments in my own adventures, gaining self-awareness about myself, being in challenges that I've had to overcome, working with people, understanding the way that people interact in different moments in teams and in partnerships, climbing. Yeah, the interest went from the adventure to the people. And the question became for me, how does that work? How is it that people can go into the outdoors and experience a natural environment under some often challenging circumstances and come out so well, gain so much?
Yeah, covers a lot of different elements, I suspect, doesn't it? Because they're challenging themselves, they're out of their comfort zone, they're facing their fears, they're working as a team. There's so many different elements that come into play.
Yeah, yes, it's a whole learning experience and a whole person experience, and then there's a spiritual element of being in a natural environment and a breaking down of a boundary between a sense of an individual being and our world that we live in, our natural environment. All of these things, it just became what I pursued, gaining more and more understanding of. Yeah.
Joe and I are really big on emotional resilience. Joe's big into fitness and exercise as well, and I've always been fascinated by the crossover between physically enduring difficult situations and translating that into emotional endurance. So if we overcome obstacles and challenges and tough situations physically, and we know that we have done that in our life, then when it comes to emotional breakdown, relationship failure, loss of a job, we can translate one form of physical resilience into emotional. Do you find that's true in the work that you do? Do you see that correlation?
I'm not sure how strong it is. I totally recognize the value of the experience of overcoming adversity, but I'm not sure how well it transfers to other. I'm not sure that it always transfers, I think, to other areas of our lives. And that is because of our blind spots that we have as humans. That if we can, I think that if I can see a capacity and an ability to overcome an obstacle in this moment, and then I can see myself in another moment and associate the same context with that overcoming, then I could probably apply the same resilience and the same experience of what it took to get there. But I don't see that in all areas of my life. I can come across areas of my life where, even though I know that I can overcome that adversity over there, this adversity here, I don't know where to start.
I really appreciate your honesty, Mark, because as humans, we have so many different layers to us. We're so deep, and you're right. And there's one adversity does not really compare to another. So totally agree with what you're saying. However, I think with each adversity, we certainly learn more about ourselves. And within that, I would like to ask you about your biggest adversity, I suppose, because you talk about running this adventure workplace, which sounds amazing. But I think our listeners would really like to understand what you went through back in 2015, if you're happy to share that with them.
Yeah, I had a little blip.
You call it that?
Yes, it was the last day of summer holiday with my family back in January 2015, and we went to the beach for our last swim, and we were playing around on surfboards, and I had a surf on a wave, fell off the surfboard and landed in what I thought was deep water, which was shallow, on my head, and it dislocated my neck, and I was instantly paralyzed. So I'm now a quadriplegic living in a wheelchair. I have a life that I guess most people see as, well, I don't know how most people see it, probably challenging for sure. And it's been a hell of a journey to get from where I was 5 years ago to where I am now. The adversities that I've faced along the way are not, the living disabled is one, but there's a hell of a lot others in there that are probably greater than the getting coming to terms with being in a wheelchair. It's not that bad being in a wheelchair. There are big obstacles in life, but they're not insurmountable. It was the mental, the biggest thing was the mental adjustment. And it went like this. I had a life that I was comfortable with before the accident, and an identity that I had spent nearly 40 years working on and developing and becoming comfortable with and growing. And then the accident it didn't take away, but it made me question all of that. Who am I? Who is this person now lying on this hospital bed, unable to move? If all of that stuff that I had in my life and what I thought I needed in my life to make me happy, I can't get access to now, I've got a choice. Either I can be miserable about what I can't access and have anymore, or I can look deeper and see what else there is and connect with something that exists beyond those circumstances, beyond a body with walking legs, beyond the person that loved being up on mountains, beyond the father that liked rolling around on the grass with his kids, beyond being with my clients and serving them and facilitating deep learning experiences for them. That was all things that I connected with and that I developed that I couldn't access as easily. So what can I access is the question. It really, it's taken me into a much deeper awareness of myself.
Mark, that's just such an interesting conversation to have, because although it translates in a very different way, most of the world now finds themselves in lockdown. They cannot access those things that they want. They can't get the social scene, the cafe society, the shopping addiction, the drink, the alcohol, the busyness, the career, the identity formed by purpose or rushing around. And so for listeners here, although their suffering is so less compared to what you've endured and gone through, what is the message then? How do we embark on going on that journey within? Because there's a journey without and there's a journey within, and you very clearly, from the conversations you and I have shared, have gone on the most admirable and courageous journey. It does take courage to go on that journey within. What does that look like for listeners?
Yeah, well, my first thought there is that suffering is relative. We all suffer deeply, and the sources of our suffering, there's no point in comparing those to each other. because we're each capable of deeply suffering regardless of the circumstances of our lives. So, yeah, I'm just overwhelmed with a sense of opportunity right now with this having to. Yeah, I guess for me it was that this is familiar territory, right? This whole sort of your world gets turned upside down, and what's left? Well, I know what's left. I guess for other people, the word surrender is and gratitude are the two words that come to mind there. Surrender to this, because it's only when we surrender it's only when I surrender that I am able to move my awareness and my attention away from something which is outside of me to what is happening inside me. As long as I'm holding on to that idea that is out there that I think that I need in my life in order for me to be safe and happy and content, if I'm holding on to that, I can only put my awareness in one place in one time. If it's out there, then it's not in here. So surrendering, what is it like? What will happen if I let go of that idea? And playing with that idea. I wonder what would happen if I let go of that idea. What happens if I do accept that loss is happening in my life? I wonder what that means for me. And then looking at my body and my feelings on the inside and seeing how I'm responding to that, and seeing where fear comes up, or seeing where joy might come up, seeing where opportunity might arise. Most likely it's fear. The dominant feeling is likely to be one of fear. And fear is an entry point for me. Fear, when I feel fear, it's an entry into another layer of myself that I'm not aware of. Fear isn't real. In my mind, there are two types of fears. There's one fear that keeps me alive, and that's the fear that prevents me from doing something willingly silly or irresponsible. But there is another type of fear, and that's the one that I create within my mind. When I identify myself as something, I usually create fear. And so the fear is that the thing that I've identified myself as might be threatened. Somebody might be saying something in my life that triggers me. Underneath that is a fear of identity, a fear of myself. If I can, rather than judge that person that's in my life at that moment, that's pointing this experience to me, that they're a mirror. That's all they are. They're just a mirror showing me myself. It's not easy. It's in those moments, it's a lot easier just to locate them as the problem, or that circumstance as the problem, because then I don't have to take responsibility. But if I can come inside, if I can notice the fear, then it is an entry point. It's like a door that I can open to look and underneath that and see, well, what is it that I'm believing about myself in this moment that is making that person the problem, where it's actually something that I can learn.
I think everything you have just said there is absolutely incredible. And our message to our listeners is usually the word acceptance. And I think that's probably a little bit like surrendering, because accepting where we are, we've never really used the word surrender, but I think it's a beautiful word to use. You're right. If we can't accept or surrender to where we are, then we lose that opportunity to actually look within. And we are not in flow, because we're forever going to fight against something as well. If we can't accept it, we're always going to be asking why, rather than think where we can go from here. So it's very, very commendable to do what you've done and to look within. And it is really painful at times and really confronting and really hard, because you're right, that fear, that identity, that things that trigger us, it's quite hard to actually go within, isn't it? And go, oh, actually, I might not like that bit about myself, or I'm going to grow there, or I need to change. I actually need to be the one to change. It's hard work.
Yeah, it is. It's so much in that moment. It's so much easier just to sit in blame or judgment of another person or a circumstance, a circumstance that we don't have control over. And yeah, I know the difference. I know what it's like in those moments. It's so much easier just to...
Everything that we look for, like everything you have described, even talking about your life, for the 40 years, you thought you had this picture in your head that that was what was providing you happiness. And I think that's where a lot of people in the world are going. You know, they look to buy the house, they look to have the baby, they look to get engaged, they look to go on a big holiday, they look to buy a new car, they want some chocolate and wine at the grocery store. They have these little bursts of happiness, but actually the only place we can actually really find happiness and peace is inside, isn't it? And it takes work.
The seeking of all of those outside things comes from an identity, a self-constructed self. I like the idea of identifying with an illusion, that this self that goes and seeks the job and goes and seeks the family and the career and the self that seeks anything is an illusion that I've identified with and that I've named as Mark. I've named that version of me as Mark, and then along with that identity comes a whole lot of rules that I have to abide to and that other people have to abide to. And if I don't follow the rules, I feel guilt or shame. If other people don't follow the rules, I judge them because they're not meeting my needs. It's an addictive illusion that we're most commonly identified with. Yeah.
And guilt and shame are big ones, aren't they? Joe and I work a lot with teenagers, and whether we look at the manifesting behaviour of anger or rage or whatever it is, clearly underneath a lot of it is shame, and shame cripples, absolutely cripples. And we say to teenagers, whatever you've done, wherever you're at, you do not need to carry any shame at all. Guilt is good because it convicts us, doesn't it, to create change?
It does, yeah.
Destroys who we are.
Yeah, guilt can move us to action, and shame can just eat us away from the inside out. Yeah, I was once a secondary school counsellor. I spent 9 years as a secondary school teacher running an outdoor program, but also counselling. And yeah, teenagers are very, very quick to identify themselves with an identity, and then compare that identity to others. And then in that judgment of their identity, come up with evaluations, and can shame, not good at, not as good as, not good enough, not wanted, not loved, not accepted, don't fit in. These can be just crippling stories for teenagers to run through their heads.
Crippling for adults as well, actually. It goes throughout the whole end. It obviously starts in the earlier years, doesn't it? And then everything is layered upon layer upon layer. And then that's why I think there are so many people in therapy to strip that all away again. Yeah,
layer upon layer. Yeah, as we grow out of our teenage, well, as I grew out of my teenage years, I learned ways to, rather than to integrate, rather than to see the negative self-talk as something that I didn't need, I think I learned ways to protect myself from it, like built layers, built protective mechanisms of identity that, I wouldn't let somebody else do that to me sort of stories, or rather than really connect with, love, that we're all human, we're all suffering. We may blame and judge somebody else, or we may see someone else as more than or better than, but it's at the end, no, it's not true. We're no different to each other. A teenager's identity is not, or their awareness is not very easily able to understand that, because they're so dependent on what they think other people think about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you've got on your website when you talk about what inspires you, and you say you've got a commitment to inspiring others, helping them see the best and the worst of themselves. Lots of people would write on a website helping them to see the best of themselves, but I love that duality, because we're all things, aren't we? And you talk about the best and the worst, and then you say in such a way as for them to take responsibility and become better people. So with the best and the worst also comes responsibility.
Yeah, and it's only by seeing that my darkness and my shadows and my blind spots and the parts of myself that other people tell me are not so good, that I don't want to listen to, it's only that they're the real gold. If I really want to grow and learn, I just need to ask somebody about something that I did that they didn't like or offended them.
That's a hard thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah. and relationships can be a great source of that, of course, because our other halves are often quicker to show us these parts of ourselves than anyone else. But, if I'm willing to listen and willing to, if I'm willing, and it's not just willing, because it's not about choice. In those moments, when I get consumed with an identity and a position that I need to be in, I don't really have choice. I'm just so consumed in that moment that I can only see the world from that lens, from that one lens, that you're wrong and I'm right, or you did that and it hurt me and you shouldn't have done that. These are places, these are just positions. And when I'm in a position like that, I don't really have choice. It's only afterwards, after I've caused all the destruction in my world, and I'm able to sit down and reflect on it, that I can go, oh, right, is that really true? Is it true that that person harmed me? Or did I actually harm myself? Or are they hurting as much as I'm hurting? How are they hurting? What pain are they suffering that caused them to be, in that state, in that moment?
And it's an amazing thing to be able to do, though, because we all know too well not everybody can do that. And it's basically, you're right, in the heat of the moment, when there's a bit of confrontation or something that's triggering us or something we don't like, it's very easy to instantly do the blame thing. It's your fault, you've done this. But actually, pretty much 99% of the time, is the other person ever really to blame? There's always two sides to every story. It's it's an old motto, but it's so true. And to be able to look at somebody else's pain it's such a great place to be, because it takes us away from ego. It takes the hurt away for us ourselves as well. But you're right, you have to go away from the situation, don't you, and look almost from an outside person looking in.
Well, if there's ever any conflict in my life, it can only occur if there are two people suffering. If the other is in love, in a place of love and compassion and self-awareness, or I'm in love and compassion and self-awareness, there can't be conflict. But it's impossible.
Lovely. Such a powerful statement to make if you think about relationships, or relationships between parents and children, lovers, friends, family, the elderly and the young. That's such a powerful statement.
Everywhere, everywhere in our lives.
Teachers, children.
Yeah, children, my children. If I'm in conflict with my children, then we're both suffering.
And, even strangers on the street, you see people all the time, don't you, in road rage, or, in supermarket trolley rage, whatever it might be. It's so easy to form aggression with aggression, rather than just actually, if they're having a bad day and they're beeping their horn or something, just go, I don't know what's going on in their life right now, so I'm not going to take that on board. I'm just going to let them be in their lane while I stay in mine. Because it's so easy, like in the past, before I knew myself, before I'd done all that work on myself, I perhaps would have gone, rah, 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 quick to jump down somebody's throat. Whereas now I'm like, no. I can't even be bothered getting involved in that kind of stuff anymore.
So true, isn't it? And that, while you're describing that, it just reminded me of this, the projection, and the way that we project. There's nothing that I experience outside of myself that doesn't originate from inside myself.
Yeah, that's what we say to people, isn't it? We say everybody is a mirror of you. Everyone.
Yeah. So that person that might have cut me off on the road or something that I experience rage at, it's got nothing to do with that person. So, I have a choice in that moment.
A question I've got for you is that some people have sort of steady lives with ups and downs and highs and lows. Some people, like yourself, have a critical accident or a situation in life that happens. And a lot of our guests that have come on board have had extraordinary life-changing situations where an event happened and it was a turning point. So we sort of talk about the before and the after. If we go back to your business then, if we look at VentureWorks, which is very much an outward bound education program, how can you translate what you've learned inwardly about yourself? How's that translated back into the business and the view of the work that you do?
Oh man, that was such a struggle for me, just reconnecting with that business. It's unbelievable that the business survived. And the business survived based on commitment and love from other people. So it was smaller than way smaller than it is now when I had the accident. I guess that what I had done is I created a business based out of my love and passion that other people's love and passion had an outlet for. They had an outlet for their love and passion in that business. And I think that is what kept that business going in the first instance was that, because I neglected it. I went through 18 months of learning how to live in a new body, and I just couldn't get my head around the responsibility. There was so much fear. There was financial fear. There was a sense of obligation to the people that were committing themselves to the business, and it was all just too much. So then it was through this process of recognizing that loss was just a perception. So the story was, how is it going to be possible for me to run an outdoor business from a wheelchair? That's ridiculous, was the story that I had in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to get the joy out of being in the outdoors with the people that we serve? How am I going to train our staff that I love training so much? Mm-hmm. So that was the story. So I started thinking about other things that I was thinking, what else should I be doing? If I don't want to do that, what should I do? And I looked at a few other things. I looked back into my counselling and coaching and things like that. Then I had this moment where I asked myself, what's wrong with this business? I have to answer that question before I move on. What is actually wrong with me running this business? And when I had done a lot of personal work by that time, and I couldn't really answer the question. I couldn't actually come up with anything that was really wrong with it. Because when I came with a problem, when I'd say to myself, well, I can't go out and be with the clients. Well, so what? The business is serving people. The business is creating positive impact in the world. Other people want this business to run. Other people are committed to it. Why not be a guardian? Why not just look at this as another entity that I'm a guardian of, rather than something that I'm actively serving in? So that was a big shift. That was a massive shift. I couldn't answer that question, what was really wrong with it. And then it was a big turn from that point. I turned from being quite reluctant to engage in the business just to full engagement. And then a couple of years later, it's a beautiful thing.
And I think you would answer so many questions for our listeners there when you say that loss is just a perception. Yeah. And what you do, which is so admirable, you talk from the I, you don't talk from the we. One does this, we did. You talk from the I. That's such a sign of maturity and growth, is when we can take responsibility for ourselves. Mm. And the other thing that I love, which I think I put out there to the listeners as well, is that you ask questions of yourself. What stops you when it comes to fear? What is stopping me? Why can't this succeed? And you came to the place of deciding, well, there was no answer. You couldn't actually answer that. No. And I think that's when we look at strategies for giving our audience for overcoming and persevering and enduring, that's such a good strategy. Come from the I statement, ask questions. What is the fear that's stopping me? And is the loss just a perception? Can I change that perception? Such powerful statements you're making.
Yeah, and it's a common place for anybody to get to, right? Is a feeling that I should be doing something else because I'm not happy enough. What I'm doing now is not good enough. I should be doing something else, but I'm not sure what that is. So
I think that would resonate with many listeners.
Yeah, like it's all that. I mean, that may be even more relevant to the midlife listeners than the younger ones, you know, where we've had a go at something for some number of years and we're still as unhappy as we were 10 years ago.
So, Mark, obviously you had your accident back in 2015. You went through 18 months of getting used to being in a wheelchair, living with your new body. And you, by the sounds of it, you've obviously really looked within, you've overcome things. Just to let our listeners know, it's a never-ending story, is it? We continue to look within, don't we? And we continue to learn. We don't just all of a sudden go one day, oh, great, I know it all now, I'm fine.
Yeah, I wish there was an end.
Because once you're on the journey of whatever you want to call it, you can call it spiritual awakening, you can, I don't know, you can call it a boom moment, whatever word you want to use, it continues all the time, doesn't it?
It's just an endless depth of self-awareness. The metaphor of peeling layers off the onion is just so appropriate. It's just an onion that doesn't have a core.
Yeah. You know, I said to a friend the other day, I said, do you know what? For goodness sake, sometimes I just wish I was stupid again. I just wish I had no awareness and I could just put on some music and dance and not worry about anything else. But unfortunately, it's not like that. But of course, we would never turn the clock back, because once you are aware.
Yeah. But I love what you just said there. And my response to that is that, oh, don't worry, there'll be plenty of places that you're not aware.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Yeah. The world shows us that it shows me through my feeling. You know, when I feel anxious, when I feel fearful, when I feel in judgment of someone else, I'm seeing an opportunity for self-awareness, if I want.
Yeah.
Or I can just sit in self-righteousness and be disconnected and judge and blame.
Yeah.
But that inevitably leads to disconnection. You know, that is not authentic. It's not how I want to live my life. But I can see how alluring and comfortable it can be.
Yeah.
I was more familiar with that in the past than what I'm familiar with now.
Yeah.
And Mark, you talk on your website about being an inspiration. You talk on the podcast about being an inspiration through Adventure Works. And you are clearly an inspiration to so many in all areas of your life through the Outward Bound activities. I mean, I have to say, as I said at the beginning, my 4 children have had changed lives because of the experience they've had with you. And one of them I know you'll probably remember is when I phoned as the worried parent in the middle of the night because they were flooded out and then her no arranges. And I went to collect my son at the end. He said, why have you come? This is the best time I've ever had. I want to keep walking. And the trip was over, but he just wanted to carry on. And the next one was sunny, and he said it wasn't half as fun as the one we were flooded out, Mum. But you are an inspiration to so many. You have changed lives. You continue to change lives. Your story of overcoming, your story of courage and surrendering and gratitude is inspiring to Joe and I know will inspire so many listeners. We are so grateful to have you on board. We can't wait for your book to come out. I don't know if you started writing one yet. I'm sure you've got many books in you. I want to read it. I'm reading at the moment The Untethered Soul, but I think yours is even better than that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got some work to do in myself to get to the point of writing a book.
Series of books.
I've got stories about that, negative stories. You know,
well, look,
you want to read my story.
No, we do. You're so inspirational. You know, I know that Joe and I are so affected already by what you say. There's lots to ponder on. There's lots that I'm going to take away after this that you've really touched on in my own personal life. Is there one message you'd like to leave our listeners before we close?
I'd like to leave a message for the teenagers, that the first thing is things pass. Everything passes. And I see young people getting consumed in anxiety and worry, or building barriers and self-protected bubbles around themselves to prevent hurt on the inside. But all of the sources of that stuff passes, and they're all opportunities to actually look inwards and to connect with others rather than to create separation between ourselves and others. And as a young person, that's really hard to do. So I guess my encouragement for young people is to talk and to share and to name what is on the inside. Because if you can start to learn to do that in a courageous way with people that you trust at a young age, then it's going to serve you in your life as an adult in ways that I could only imagine I would have benefited from. So share, listen to each other, share what is joyful, share what is painful, be courageous in your sharing, be vulnerable with each other, listen to each other, let each other be vulnerable, and it will serve you well.
Beautiful, beautiful words. All them words: courageous, vulnerable, brave. They're words that Sue and I use a lot. So what a beautiful, beautiful message to teenagers and to everybody else. To be fair, be vulnerable, share. And you're right, everything does pass, and time is a great healer. Yeah.
There's a lot of synergies between where you're both going and where I've been, and it's been a beautiful moment to come together.
And the bubble analogy as well. I mean, how powerful is that metaphor? You're talking about the bubbles that people create around.
Right. I didn't.
We're all in bubbles, in isolation, lockdown, wherever we are around the world. We've got these external bubbles which we're living in our homes with the people within it. But actually, within that bubble, can we go into the next layer of the bubble, and can we go into ourselves in this time of isolation and say, I'm going to go into my own bubble. Have I put that bubble around myself that Mark talked about on the podcast? And how can I start to bring that down to expose my own vulnerability and be in vulnerability, and therefore be in growth and innovation? And I know you and I talked about exciting changes that will happen at this time as well. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be casualties along the way. But also, it's such an exciting time if we can take responsibility for ourselves.
Yeah, I think the biggest casualties are just going to be casualties of illusion and ego. And that's we want those to die.
Yeah, fair point. I think everybody's going to come out a little bit more grounded, a little bit more understanding of what is important to them and why it's important. And they're great lessons to learn, and it's a really great place for people to start looking within.
Yeah.
Mark Mandeno, thank you so much for joining us. You've been an extraordinary guest. Thank you for your time, and we can't wait to see where AdventureWorks goes, where you go, and the people that come on board your business as well. It's very exciting. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. I've enjoyed this.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.